volvemos al videojuego, estrictamente hablando, al videojuego independiente. Nuestras siguientes invitadas van a darnos un post-mortem que es, digamos, un análisis a posteriori de los aciertos y fracasos del lanzamiento de un producto. En este caso, mayormente vamos a hablar de aciertos, porque hablamos de uno de los juegos indie más exitosos del año pasado, de INMOST, publicado por Chucklefish, que, bueno, a su vez cuentan en su track record con otros éxitos como Wargroove o Stardew Valley. Contamos con nosotros con Katy, Ellis, Marketing Lead, y Caoimhe, Roddy, productora de Chucklefish. Perdón que me pasa al inglés. Good afternoon, Caoimhe. Good afternoon, Katy.
Hi there. Hi.
Very nice to hear from you. Thank you very much for being here and opening your house for the Fun and Serious Game Festival. Quite literally, right? Well, first of all, could you introduce INMOST for our audience? Let's think that there might be some people who don't know about the game. So, a few quick words about the game. What's INMOST about?
Sure. So INMOST is a indie puzzle platformer. It's developed by the team at Hidden Layer Games, who are based in Ukraine. It's actually a two-person development team. So obviously as Chucklefish, we're the publishers. But yeah, it's a kind of emotional, very atmospheric pixel art puzzle platformer. It deals with quite mature themes of like love and loss, and it's really beautiful game.
I think we have the trailer ready, actually. So if my colleagues could put in.
Perfect.
Just a second.
Seconds.
That was beautiful. Let's follow the timeline here. How did you discover the project? What made you fall in love with this game?
Want me to go for this one, or you, Kiva?
You can go for it.
Sure. Well, actually, neither Kiva and I were actually at Chucklefish when INMOST was first signed, but I know that so the two-man dev team, Alexei and Andrei, they were looking for a publisher for their project INMOST. At the time, they used to be in a smaller kind of development studio where they made mobile games and like online flash games. They were mostly puzzle games, and they would kind of work project to project on other people's making other people's games. But obviously it's a very difficult climate to work in, and studio funds were quite low, and they really wanted to make like a bigger indie project, something that was really special. And in their mind, they wanted to make INMOST, a very dark, mature game. So they took it to a show in Minsk, and they put it up for an award, and they kind of entered it into a competition. And they decided that if they got the money from the competition, if they won, they'd be able to make this game. So thankfully they won the competition, which is great. And that's when they kind of started looking for publishers. So Chucklefish is obviously one of the ones they contacted. And I know from my teammate Tom, who is the one who reviews all of our games, the moment he saw it, he was like, "This is amazing. You know, how do we get involved with this project? It's just so beautiful." And I think the beautiful pixel art and the style of it just jumps out at you immediately. And it's come on a long way visually as well from when we first saw it until what it looks like now. Yeah, I think from the moment we saw it, I'm sure as you've seen from the trailer, like we knew we had to sign that game.
Considering how long does it take to develop a game, I'm guessing that would have been 2 years ago?
Oh, yeah, probably about 3 years ago, I think now.
Good 3
Yeah,
years ago.
2017, I think it was signed.
And I'm guessing, Caoimhe, that your role as producer at Chucklefish implied that you have been monitoring the project and the development of the game throughout these 3 years, right?
Not quite. So the guys kind of made the game on their own up until last summer. So in summer 2019, they got a contract with Apple Arcade to have INMOST ready for Apple Arcade on launch, which they were really excited about, but they needed some extra help. And Chucklefish didn't have a producer on the publishing side up until this point. So they ended up finding me, and I helped the guys like build a team. We got some freelancers on board who kind of helped them out with some of the art. And we were able to get the game out in time for Apple Arcade. And kind of from there, I stayed on with Chucklefish and was able to help the guys with kind of their journey onto Steam and Nintendo Switch as well.
Mm-hmm. How do you design the marketing plan for a product such as this? When you sit down and decide what to do with this game, where to market it, where's the right audience for it? How's that discussion?
Oh, it's always an exciting one. I think it always starts off, to be honest, from our side, we're quite a small team. And for us, it's all about playing the game like as much as possible. Like we're playing it like all the time, over and over, trying to learn it as much as possible inside and out, because, you know, we're the ones who have to kind of be its first advocator. So once we've played it and we all have our favorite parts of it, we come together as a team and we talk about like our favorite aspects, what we think is really going to appeal to other players. Because if it appeals to us, hopefully you'd think it would appeal to, you know, to other gamers. So we will kind of sit down and we try and pick out 3 key points, which are like the 3 key takeaways. Like if I was talking to you about INMOST, what's the 3 things that I want to make sure that you leave our conversation knowing? So I think, you know, for INMOST, it was the fact that you can play with like 3 different playable characters, that it's got this amazing atmosphere, which is shown through like the visuals, the music, you know, the world. And, you know, all these things that is so important to make sure people understand. So once we have those kind of key things in place, we then sit down together and we think, okay, so how are we going to make sure that people know about it? And that's when we kind of look at, for example, you know, we know that the music is fantastic in INMOST and we really love it. How can we make sure that other people hear about that too? So we thought of all these fun, silly ways, you know, that we can kind of share that message. So it's a lot of like thinking about the audience of the game and the things we want to appeal to them, and then like making up ideas based on that. And some ideas are quite, I guess you could say, more obvious, like, you know, okay, who's the right streamer for this game? But other ideas are a bit more crazy, I guess you could say, where we're like, you know, everybody's at home this year listening to lots of lo-fi hip hop, you know, chill beats, that kind of thing on YouTube. You know, and we thought, oh, what's a really fun way of putting these things together? So we made our own INMOST like lo-fi beats to chill to kind of video, because, you know, we're just trying to find fun ways of connecting with the audience. So lots of weird things like that.
It's fundamentally different promoting an indie game than a AAA game, because it's not the same kind of product. You don't have the same budget, but at the same time, it's kind of the same because you have to follow the similar timeline of having a beta, and then you go to previews, then you prepare for release, hype your audience as much as possible. I don't know if you have experience working in AAA, but how do you approach that? It's a bit like guerrilla warfare adapted to marketing, right?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is probably the time scale you've got. You know, with AAA, you can normally say, you kind of know when the game's coming out, and you know it's going to come out on that day because you've got so many other people who are reliant on it coming out that day. You know, there's also shareholders and stuff involved. Whereas with indie, especially with Chucklefish, you know, we're kind of, we advocate for like no crunch, kind of go at your own pace. If the game's not ready, we're not going to put it out. You know, so we can't always say, okay, the game is definitely coming out on this date. So we can't build and keep that same hype train going, because you don't know if it's suddenly going to be like, oh, actually, we need another few months. So for us, it's about really carefully thinking, okay, we want to get people excited. We want to obviously increase interest over time, but we don't want to do it too soon or, you know, too early, so that, you know, in a few months' time, if we have to hit the brakes and delay it a little bit, that it's not going to cause problems. So yeah, I think for us, it's a lot about being really adaptive and flexible, and just keeping talking to our developers and saying, you know, if it's not ready, we're not going to start like throwing trailers everywhere and stuff, because it's just not the right thing to do. I don't know from the production side if you feel so, have anything else on that.
Yeah, like I think we're quite lucky in indie, where I think we can be a little bit more flexible with our timelines. There can, of course, be like budget constraints and things that might be, you know, in 6 months' time. It'll have to be launched within 6 months because we'll like kind of run out of money. But like there is some flexibility in terms of like, you know, you maybe aren't having to kind of plan the same marketing, like scale of marketing campaign as you would AAA that needs more time, which also means that, you know, that kind of relaxes things on the production side as well, because a marketing campaign can put a lot of pressure on a game that's being developed, because suddenly everything becomes very real and everything has to kind of come out kind of soon so that, you know, the campaign has the highest impact it can. So yeah, I think like marketing and production always have to very much work in tandem, with, you know, how we kind of approach this with, especially Chucklefish. We try to put as little pressure on the developers as we possibly can.
Then you've got all these plans, all these strategies, and boom, a pandemic starts. How did that affect your... Because I'm guessing that in the daily life of your relation with the studio, it wasn't that different. They are in Lithuania, you are in the UK. So it was remote work anyway, but now you had to grab the attention of people who were mostly discussing the pandemic, while at the same time they were consuming more games than ever. So it's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge. I guess there was some serious redesigning of the strategy, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of it is probably more on Kiva's side, actually, with production. You know, as we were saying, we can kind of change timelines and things like that. From most of our marketing is quite online anyway. I think the biggest impact it had from the marketing side was probably just we couldn't do events, you know, and I think events and getting the game into people's hands is so important. And I love digital events. I love digital demos. I think they're great for getting to lots of people. I don't think you can make that same physical connection with players and fans. Like, I know last year when we did a couple of shows with the INMOST developers in person, you know, it was so important for them seeing people reacting to their game and seeing them like smiling or being shocked or scared at the right moments, because it tells them so much about how the game works. And I think that was a real shame that we missed out on that kind of the last chance of doing that. But yeah, as I said, I think it's mostly production side which it impacted.
Yeah, we were quite lucky that that INMOST came out on Apple Arcade the year before. It came out in September or October 2019, and yeah, they already had a lot of the work out of the way, but there was still the Switch port to happen, and we actually found that trying to get the appropriate like QA kind of ready was quite difficult, because a lot of teams had suddenly went remote that weren't used to working remote. The INMOST guys were kind of used to it because they'd just been a remote team for years, but all the third parties and stuff had to kind of fall in place as well. And it definitely extended timelines by quite a bit. There's like a submission process and everything that you have to go through with Nintendo that kind of got stretched out a little bit. But you know, because those guys are kind of remote anyway, I'd say the team itself probably welcomed a bit of the extra time for some polish and to add like a few bits of content that they wanted to kind of build into the game. But yeah, it's tough for everyone in a pandemic.
It's been a long year, yes.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see the back of it. How was the last month, the release campaign? How would you summarize the strategy for the release of the game?
Ooh, I guess for us, it was really about making sure people understood what the game was kind of about and the atmosphere. Because I think when you look at a puzzle platformer, you know, there's a lot of puzzle platformers about, and there's a lot of pixel art puzzle platformers. But INMOST has so much more in that it has the really beautiful, kind of more adult and melancholic themes. It's, you know, it's so lovely in that way. And we also had to be quite careful because it's a slightly shorter game than your classic 60-hour AAA RPGs, you know. So, you know, we wanted to make sure we kind of showed a little bit, but not too much. And from our point of view, the best way of doing that was, for the Switch launch at least, was making sure that we kind of worked with Nintendo to get the trailer and stuff like that and the release date revealed during the Nintendo Indie World Showcase, because, you know, if you want to hit your audience on Nintendo, there's no better way than doing it on that showcase. So we were working really closely with the team at Nintendo to try and keep them updated on that. And then from the other side, I think a really important thing for INMOST and a really fun thing to work on has been all the collaborations we got to do. And one of the big influences for INMOST is Kangal's To the Moon. And I'm sure if our artist Alexi is watching, it's one of, you know, his favorite games and a really big inspiration. So we spoke to Kangal and we said, you know, can we possibly work together to maybe offer players for To the Moon like a discount on INMOST, you know, ways where we can kind of like introduce INMOST players to the Moon because it's such a big inspiration, but also kind of reciprocate that back, which was really fantastic. And we also worked with Corsair, the PC company who kind of did RGB, like dynamic lighting for the game, which really enhanced the mood and atmosphere. So all these little like small projects we did together, I think all kind of combined to make this like greater showcase of like the atmosphere of the game.
Yeah, the Corsair partnership was so perfect. Like they got in touch and were like, "This is something that we do with our keyboards and mice and stuff. Is there any game that you think would fit?" And we were like, "We have the perfect game, like just to build on so much atmosphere." It was nice.
Now, finally, the game came out. It's being a success. Congratulations. And I guess that you have looked back and evaluate how the whole strategy played out. So you should have, I guess, a pretty good idea of what went well, what was a good idea, what didn't went that well, and what went much better than expected. What were the big surprises and the successes and the lessons you have learned?
Do you want to go first, Keith?
I think you know, after like production, it's really interesting to see how many people related to the game based on like it being such a tiny team and an emotional story. One thing was that we kept watching Twitch streams of the game, and we knew the game was an emotional experience, but we had also been working on it for like so long that, you know, we maybe didn't realize how hard it was going to hit to some first-time players. And you would just almost every Twitch stream you joined, if people got to the end, just the streamers would just be crying, and their chat would be trying to comfort them. And I think like seeing that emotional impact was really like lovely. Alexei did say his one goal was to make players cry. He succeeded.
Yeah, I think that was a really, you know, the streamer interaction was really important, and it was a really lovely thing to see. I think if anything, you know, I kind of, it's the same thing as kind of Kiva was saying, where you play it so much that you don't quite realize the impact it's going to have. And I think maybe elevating it even more so as like a really beautiful story and, you know, very kind of not upsetting, I think that's the wrong word, but, you know, like emotional story, I think would have been really good to do even more so in the run up to it. In terms of things I feel like I've learned from the experience, I think but definitely being our first Apple Arcade launch was, you're always going to have learnings from that. And I definitely think next time I would put more focus on making sure that we get as much attention in the press and things like that during that first release as you can, because we launched on Apple Arcade first and then Switch and PC later. And I think you only get one shot at a game launch. Games only come out once. It doesn't matter the platform. And in terms of multi-platform reviews, I think you have to make sure, regardless, that you make sure that you get the reviews then. Because when it comes out onto the other platforms, it's like old news. So yeah. I think making sure that you have, you've got all your reviews and stuff lined up the first time around is important.
How did Apple Arcade play for you on the game? I'm always curious about this new subscription model. I don't know if it makes sense for indie devs as a business model.
I think it definitely made sense for INMOST. It was a huge success for the project, and it put a lot of worry out of the mind. Obviously, it's difficult. We can't always go into the specifics about how it all works, but it's safe to say that it did well enough for us not to worry at all about the PC and Switch launch and everything. So it was a big relief for the team to have that, and it was a great thing to work on. I think Kiva probably has more in it because you worked much more closely with it.
Yeah, the Apple Arcade launch was definitely a very stressful period for the developers, because for about a 4-month period they ramped up the team to kind of help deliver on some content. But even though it was stressful in terms of getting out in time for lunch, I'd say that the stresses of the studio were lifted very much so, to the point where the team originally wanted to release PC and Switch a lot sooner. But because they kind of didn't have any concerns around how successful that PC and Switch launch needed to be anymore, they were like, we want to spend more time on this, and we want to make sure that INMOST is the best game we can possibly deliver to our players. And we're like, they really took another 9 months then to kind of keep working on it, and I think that was really worth it for them.
As for one of my last questions, if not the last one, because I'm running out of time, but I want to give the indie devs and game dev students who are watching us an insight into the kind of game you like how they should approach you. What do you look for in a game?
Oh. So we don't really have a set rule for what a Chucklefish game is. It's very much, we very much take each game as it comes, and any game has the potential to change our ideas of what Chucklefish are willing to publish. But I would say, again and again, that we, if you look across our portfolio, I think every single one of the games that we've published, the visuals are beautiful. And there's either a really engaging story to tell or some really interesting mechanics to kind of try out. And I know that sounds really, really vague, but it is true. We look through our publishing submissions very frequently, and it's always there's always a few games that'll always make us go, how could we work with this one?
Yeah, I think we get a lot of pitches which are really great games, but games that are saying things like, we're going to be the next Stardew Valley, or we're going to be the next Dead Cells, or something like that. And I think what we're really always interested in is, okay, that's great, but what makes your game special? What's the special feature of your game, And really selling that in the first line, because that's what we're always interested in, what sets your game apart.
Mm-hmm. And now, my last question. Lots of the guests we've had this day and on yesterday told me that many of the lessons they have learned, many of the new protocols that they have implemented because of the pandemic are here to stay, that some things have changed forever. How much do you think that apply to you and your own processes? How many of these lessons or new ways to work are here to stay forever?
I guess that's quite interesting in Chucklefish, isn't it? Because it's already such a flexible studio. What do you think, Eva?
Yeah, it's very flexible. Like myself and the product manager kind of already worked from home away from London before the pandemic, and we work with a bunch of remote teams. So I feel like the transition for our publishing side maybe wasn't as big a shock as it was for the dev side, because the devs always work in the office. But I imagine that people are always now going to feel more comfortable with, people taking more work from home days, and kind of like a more relaxed approach. Like you don't always have to be in the office to have good communication, which is kind of a myth that's kind of been around since before the pandemic. Good production processes are going to support good communication throughout the development of a game, no matter if that's from home or in an office.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think actually during the time we've been working at home, because I used to work in the office and obviously Kiva didn't, was working from home. I think we actually talk more now than we did when we were in the office together. Well, not together, but and I really hope that when things go back to whatever normal is anymore, that we can kind of continue just sitting on Discord and like chatting, because being able to chat more has just been really lovely, and I've really enjoyed that about this year actually. So I hope we just keep communicating as much as we are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, for being present in this edition of the festival. It's been a weird one, I have to admit that. And I hope we can see you guys next year in this festival in Bilbao, hopefully in person, and if not, in a digital way, just as we did this year.
Hope so
That would
too.
be really fun. I hope so, yeah.
Rosie came last year, Rosie Ball. I hope she had a good time and put a good word for us.
She really did. She was like, "Oh, I wish I worked on INMOST whenever you got in touch." she loves this. She loves this festival.
Send her my regards. Thank you very
Will do.
much for being here for us today, and best of luck in your next projects and for the whole next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.